Welcome to Club Geneva, where the shadows linger and every story holds a secret. I'm your host, Shay, and I'm inviting you to step into the unknown and uncover tales that will keep you awake long after the lights go out. Here at Club Geneva, we're not just telling stories, we're taking you places you've never been and places that exist just on the edge of reality. In the quiet fall of 2021, on the outskirts of Montgomery, Alabama, Pastor Jason Morrison has served his small congregation at Holy Life Baptist Church for over a decade. Known for his kind heart and unwavering faith, Jay's life revolved around his ministry, his family, and his love for his wife, Chantel. Together, they were the community's power couple, a symbol of what faith and love could accomplish. But everything began to unravel when a new deacon, Agin joined the church. Agin was charismatic, sharp, and had a magnetic aura that drew people to him instantly. He was the kind of man who could make people laugh and nod with every word he said. But the pastor felt something unsettling about him. A sense that Agin's charm was masking something, but he couldn't be sure, so he prayed for clarity in the matter. However, his unease grew stronger as Agin and Chantel became close, often talking at church services and sitting together at church functions, so he heard from a few people in the congregation. At first, Jay dismissed the concerns, blaming it on paranoia. After all, he had trusted his wife. She was a woman of faith, and they had built a life together on honesty and love, or so he thought. One evening, Jay came home early from a church meeting, feeling drained and wanting nothing more than to see his wife smile. But as he walked in, the silence in the room felt heavy. He found Chantel in the kitchen, but she looked startled, her phone slipping from her hand, as she turned to him with wide eyes. "Oh, Jay," she stammered, a guilty look flashing across her face before she forced a smile. That night, doubts churned in Jay's mind, feeding into festering insecurity he felt every time he saw Agin and Chantel together. Eventually, rumors started circulating in the church. Members would whisper behind Jay's back, dropping hints of Chantel's alleged affair with Agin. Jay was humiliated, his pride was shredded. His own wife and a man from his congregation he trusted more than anyone had betrayed him. In desperation, Jay confronted Chantel, but her tear-streaked face only offered silence. She neither confirmed nor denied the affair, leaving Jay with a gaping wound of uncertainty. The congregation then began to split into factions. Some stood by Jay, but many sided with Agin, who had taken over more responsibilities in the church. As tensions escalated, Jay made the difficult decision to file for divorce and petition for the board to remove Agin. But Agin fought back with venom. He publicly accused Jay of stealing church tithes to fund personal expenses, claiming that Chantel had confided in him about Jay's alleged sins. The rumors turned into a wildfire, devouring Jay's reputation, and within weeks he was stripped of his pastoral position. Holy Life Baptist turned against him, his ministry shattered, his heart hollowed, but the nightmare only deepened. The morning after his final service, Jay was awakened by a frantic call from one of the people in the church. Chantel's body had been found by the church janitor stuffed in a dumpster, dismembered and arranged in the shape of an upside-down cross, or so it seemed. Her severed limbs, twisted and bleeding, were pointing in eerie directions, and her eyes stared up into the nothingness, glassy and lifeless. Jay collapsed at the news. As he tried to comprehend the horror of his ex-wife's murder, the police became relentless, questioning him as their primary suspect. To them, it was clear-cut. A disgraced pastor, angry and humiliated, might have taken revenge in a moment of madness. Jay found himself trapped in a web of accusations, with no way to prove his innocence. People in the town avoided him, their eyes full of judgment. His world became smaller, lonelier, and darker by the day. One evening, broken and hopeless, Jay found himself sifting through Chantel's belongings, desperate to understand the mystery surrounding the affair and her death. In an old box, he discovered a dusty DVD labeled with a date just a few weeks before her murder. With trembling hands, Jay inserted the DVD into an old player. his heart racing with a strange mixture of fear and hope. The video was grainy, the images distorted and shaky. Jay could make out his wife's figure sitting on the edge of the bed with Agin beside her. The room was dimly lit, candles flickering off the dresser, casting ominous shadows on the walls. Jay's stomach twisted as he watched the scene unfold. Agin leaned close to Chantel, his voice low, murmuring words that seemed to form an ancient guttural chant. His eyes glowed faint, unnaturally yellow, and his mouth moved with a rhythm that did not match the way that he spoke. As Agin whispered into Chantel's ear, her body tensed, her pupils dilating until her eyes were nearly black. She seemed entranced, her movements mechanical as she undressed, reaching for Agin with a desperation that made Jay's skin crawl. In the background, a cross on the wall began to rotate, spinning slowly as the lights glowed with an ominous red. Shadows lurked in the corners of the room, their forms twisting and writhing as if watching and waiting. Jay's hands flew to his mouth, with bile rising in his throat as he witnessed the horrifying scene. Fast forwarding, he found another segment. Chantel alone in the room, sobbing softly. She whispered, looking directly into the camera. "Jay, if you find this, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen," her voice cracked as she clenched her hands in front of her, trembling. "Agin, he's not who you think he is. He's a demon, Jay. He's been controlling me. I tried to fight it, but I couldn't. I couldn't escape." Jay froze, his mind racing as he tried to comprehend what he was seeing. Chantel's tear-streaked face stared back at him, her eyes hollow with despair. "Please forgive me, honey. And don't let him ruin you too." She wiped her face and slowly turned off the camera, and the screen went black. The weight of the revelation crushed Jay's soul. He believed his wife had betrayed him, abandoned him, and led to the destruction of his life. But it hadn't been Chantel who had broken their vows. It was Agin, the man who had masqueraded as a child of God while hiding a demonic nature beneath him. Everything Jay had suffered had been orchestrated by a creature that fed on destruction. That night, Jay was overwhelmed by a creeping dread, a sense that he was not alone. Shadows seemed to stretch and coil around him as he sat in his darkened living room, clutching the DVD. The air grew heavy, thick with the sulfurous stench, and a low growl echoed from the hallway. Slowly he turned, heart pounding, as he saw a figure standing in the doorway. Tall, dark, with upended slits that resembled crosses that were glowing yellow in place of his eyes. Agin's lips curled into a mocking smile, with his voice dripping with malice. "She was weak, Jay. I had her, we had her, and now every minion below your feet will have her for eternity. She was so scared and so sweet, Pastor Jay," the being sarcastically relished. "And now she's gone. We ripped her apart, just like your faith and just like your church," his voice echoed, twisting into laughter that clawed at Jay's sanity. Jay tried to speak, but his throat closed, his voice stolen by fear. Jay woke up the next day with a gasp, realizing he had passed out. He would have thought this was just a nightmare. However, he was brought back to reality as he glanced over and seen the DVD shatter into 5 pieces, as was his beautiful wife. Jay screamed at the heavens, "Why, God?" But there was no answer, just simply silence. In the following months, Jay spiraled deeper into despair. He was haunted by nightmares, visions of Chantel's dismembered body, and the feelings of unseen eyes watching him at every waking hour. People shunned him completely, and his spirit was broken beyond repair. He couldn't escape the shadows of Agin, who seemed to be everywhere, lurking in every corner of Jay's mind. One early spring day, the detectives who had previously paused the case of Jay's wife, Chantel, due to lack of evidence, transcended upon the home of the once beloved Pastor J. They had recently found some shocking and unnerving evidence from the forensic department that had cleared Jay of the gruesome murder. They wanted to speak to the pastor personally and apologize to him for all that he had went through. They also wanted to ask him, would he be able to help them figure out how would his wife have ended up with minute particles of soil on her body that can only be found near places with active volcanoes. There was no place like that 1,000 miles close to Alabama. To top that, the coroner just walked away one night while working on the body. He left everything, even his coat, in the dead of a cold winter night. Hell, he even quit being a coroner altogether. When they finally asked as to why he would do something so unlike himself and his character, he simply said, "Don't ever come back here, fellas," and slowly shut the door. As the detectives walked down the path to leave the home, they heard 2 shots from a high-caliber rifle. It seemed that the coroner had shot his beloved German Shepherd and also himself. However, the detectives would never get the chance to speak to Jay. Once they got inside of his home, they found it in disarray with scratches etched into the walls and symbols drawn in blood. A new case was opened at this time in the disappearance of Pastor J. Pastor Agin was never accused due to church folks claiming that he was with them during the time in which the murder would have happened. A whole year had passed by now, and the town folks said that they had heard whispers of strange chants in the night, that the church lights flickered on at odd hours, and that shadows moved against the wall inside the Holy Baptist Church. Rumors around town said that Jay became a wandering spirit, forever trapped between life and death, eternally haunted by the grief he felt from losing his wife. And in hushed, haunted nights at Montgomery, they say if you listen closely outside of the Holy Life Baptist Church, you can hear a whisper on the wind, a broken man's plea. In the coming months, winter arrived with light snowflakes, bringing a sense of joy to the community. The holiday should have given the church something to feel relieved about. However, Agin, now the uncontested leader of the Holy Life Baptist Church, had swiftly made changes since Pastor Jay's ousting and disappearance. Most of the other church leaders had left, so many of the faces handpicked by Agin filled the leadership roles. These new, strange people seemed otherworldly at times. No one knew much about them, and they only spoke occasionally. And when they did, they seemed to insist on higher tithes and strange offerings, granting gifts to those who followed unwaveringly. And what was also strange is that a few of those members who had left the church faced unfortunate fates, death, disease, and other harsh realities. Each Sunday, members attended the sermons, often with despair in their eyes, as if they had no choice. Agin was frequently seen around town with many of the women from the church, whether married or not. Worst of all, many of the children seemed to have fallen victim to the sins of this unholy ministry. But now it was Christmas Eve. As in years past, the church held events to celebrate the season. The community gathered as they had when Pastor Jay was around. Smiles and laughter echoed throughout the church, some genuine and some forced. As the event began, the congregation was directed to take their seats in the pews. Pastor Agin delivered an elegant yet sinister rebuke of the quote-unquote old ways. He encouraged practices that strayed from traditional Christian beliefs. His worldly tone made some townsfolk gasp. He went on to claim that Jesus Christ's birth was fiction. Instead, he preached that the true birth was when Lucifer fell to earth, a birth of enlightenment from flames. He declared that he was sent to the church to not bring the gifts of the Spirit, but the gifts of the flesh. As his words settled over the crowd, the congregation rose in involuntary praise, while others outside of the church from the community stood shaken. Suddenly, a man in a black suit entered the church. He wore a low-brimmed hat, lightly tinted shades, and a black mask. In his hand, he carried a gift, wrapped in Christmas colors with a bow. His face was hidden, and no one questioned it, considering the recent uptick in COVID-19 cases. He sat quietly at the back as the sermon continued. As Agin concluded, he said, "All gifts come from my Father and my Father alone. If anyone stands against the word, let him speak now." A voice echoed from the back. It was the man in black. "Pastor, I challenge those words," he said in a low, growling voice. The congregation gasped as he stood with the gift under his arm and walked towards the altar. "Pastor," he continued, "your words are flawed, and the gifts you describe can only lead to darkness. The Lord brought me here to speak these things." Agin quickly shouted, "Who are you to come into my house and denounce the word of the true Father?" The man in black paused and looked up at Agin. He removed his hat, and as he pulled down his mask, his face was revealed. It was Pastor Jay. The congregation stared as if they had seen a ghost, and Agin's eyes burned with hate. Jay responded calmly, "Well, Pastor, this house is actually mine, and the Lord sent me to reclaim it." Before Agin could utter another word, Jay raised the gift towards him and pulled a hidden trigger. The short-barreled shotgun concealed in the box discharged, hitting Agin square in his face. His head shattered, spraying blood and brain matter onto the stained glass behind the pulpit. White confetti and glitter burst from the box, raining down over the stunned congregation as smoke drifted from the front of the gift box. Agin's hand-picked cabinet of leaders ran like cowards towards the exits, but Jay gave no chase. As he let the gift box fall to the floor, he turned slowly to face the congregation and town folks alike. With a quiet authority, he said, "All gifts come from above." Pastor Jay was back home. Have your own stories to share? We'd love to hear them. So send your true horror stories, supernatural encounters, or chilling experiences to clb.geneva@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook at Club Geneva to stay connected. And who knows, your story might make it into our episodes. Thank you for viewing.